someone says peptides are snake oil, they are wrong. But when someone says peptide work and they are this magic pill, they are also wrong. Peptide is truly simply a short chain of amino acids. They are the building blocks that build the proteins. Just because one peptide works does not mean all the peptide works. The key here is FDA is approved for over 100 peptide drugs, but the peptides, which is flooding the wellness clinic, have almost none of these trials. Most cases, what is actually being sold to you is never been tested on humans. We have wellness clinics charging thousands of dollars per session, and the scientific foundation is fewer than 30 humans ever studied on BP 157 and literally zero on TB 500. This is a big gap, and this is very scary that we have so many people on these medications and we don't know what they can do to you.
Welcome back to Infinite Health, where we never take a health claim at face value. We take it to the research. So today, we're going deep on one of the hottest and most debated topics in wellness right now, peptides. Specifically, which ones are grounded in real science and which ones are really being sold to you on nothing but influencer marketing, and which ones might actually be putting your health at risk. Joe Rogan is injecting them, RFK Jr. is lobbying the FDA about them, wellness clinics are charging thousands of dollars for them, and people are ordering them from Chinese labs online, unlabeled, and injecting them into their own bodies. And that's just the world we're living in right now. So by the end of this episode, you'll have a clear framework for evaluating any peptide you're going to hear about, and not based on who's promoting it, but based on the actual science. So we know we're all hearing about this all the time. So I'm super excited to hop into this episode with Dr. Maran. How are you today, by the way?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. This is a hot topic. So I really want to hear your take on it because I know I can trust you and this is not some influencer knowledge online. It's the science. So I'm excited to hop in with you. So let's start at the beginning. So what actually is a peptide?
You know what, Layla, I have to thank you for starting off this conversation because it's truly a very hot topic right now. And there are things about this topic no one's ever talking about. This is truly not a fringe topic. Insulin is a peptide. Ozempic is a peptide. FDA has approved over 80 peptides. So the concept is one of most important in modern medicine. So when someone says peptides are snake oil, they are wrong. But when someone says peptide work and they are this magic pill, which we've never had before, they are also wrong. Okay, so there is this kind of this in-between space where science and credibility are not kind of matching together. So I hope by the end of this conversation, we can really, deep dive into it and map out what works, what we don't know about, and what we know does not work, and therefore people should not be spending thousands of dollars into it. So you asked me what actually is the peptide, right? So the peptide is truly simply a short chain of amino acids. They are the building blocks that build the proteins. Your body makes thousands of them naturally, and they are signaling molecules. They tell your cells what to do: grow, repair, release a hormone, mount an immune response, regulate hunger. They are basically the body's internal messaging systems. And some of them are the most important discoveries ever made in the history of the humankind. Like, for example, insulin discovered in 1921, life-saving, and that's a peptide. Oxytocin, which is used in labor wards worldwide. I was induced with oxytocin. Very important peptide. GLP-1, Ozempic, Wegovy, Manjaro, Trulicity, they're all transforming the way we treat obesity, cardiovascular disease, obstructive sleep apnea. They are all peptides. The FDA has approved them, and they've approved over 100 peptide-based drugs. So it's not fringe science. This is mainstream medicine.
Absolutely. And beyond that, we're all hearing about peptides, especially GLP-1s and things like that. But why do you think that it's suddenly exploded into the wellness conversation? Why do you think all of a sudden it sounds like everyone's talking about them wherever it is that you go or listen to?
The problem is a logical leap that the wellness industry makes constantly and nobody calls it out. The leap is peptides work. Yeah, I can see that from insulin and Ozempic and oxytocin, that there are specific peptides which works. But science is not black or white, right? Each compound like insulin and oxytocin, they have been tested independently in controlled trials, starting with animals, then with humans, and there was randomization. And, just because one peptide works does not mean all the peptide works. The key here is FDA is approved for over 100 peptide drugs, all in phase 1, phase 2 randomized control trial. But the peptides, which is flooding the wellness clinic, have almost none of these trial. They are the same chemical category. They fall under the umbrella of peptides, but the evidence they are based upon is completely different. But the marketing consistently runs these two together. Peptide therapy, it carries the same credibility of insulin and oxytocin and Ozempic, but in most cases, what is actually being sold to you is never been tested on humans, and if at all, a handful of humans, if any. So, that's the problem here.
Absolutely, and that's concerning. But kind of even before we get to the ones that concern you specifically, let's talk about the ones that actually work. So what are some of the ones that actually work, and what does, let's say, the gold standard kind of look like?
Okay, so let's talk about the peptides, which has been studied intensively. Okay, insulin has been studied in tens and to thousands of clinical trials over a century. It's a beautiful, safe, it's the example or the prototype peptide, I would say. Okay, the safety profile, the efficacy, the dosing, it's all established beyond any reasonable doubt. That's a peptide. Semaglutide went through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 randomized control trial involving thousands of participants across the country. Phase 3 trials for weight management involved over 1,900 patients studied for 68 weeks. The results were repeatedly replicated. The side effects were documented. FDA approval followed. That's what evidence-based medicine looks like. Let's look at oxytocin, approved for labor induction and postpartum hemorrhage control. Decades of clinical use in hospitals. Vasopressin, approved for diabetes insipidus, also for sepsis therapies. Then you have the tesamorelin, the only FDA-approved growth hormone releasing analog, kind of a hormone with specific clinical evidence for reducing visceral abdominal fat. Then you have the zinconatide, a peptide derived from the cone snail venom, again approved for severe chronic pain. The gold standard here, you have the phase 1 where you have safety in healthy volunteers, phase 2 efficacy in patients, phase 3 large scale confirmation, then you have FDA review, then you have post marketing surveillance to look for side effects and all of that. So typically 10 to 15 years and, approximately over of several thousands to billions of dollars. These peptides went through all of that. The standard is high. The expense is also high.
Absolutely. And so I don't know much about this, but what is the Wolverine stack and why is Joe Rogan injecting it and what is it? Let's talk about it.
All right. Okay. So now we are stepping out of beautiful, concrete, evidence-based science to a gray area. Okay, the pharma companies won't fund trials for these compounds, which they can't patent, and there is a kernel of truth. But it cuts both ways, right? If something genuinely worked as well, like the peptides BPC 157, which is claimed to work, they would find a way to patent it. They would either formulate it differently or they will administer or the dosing protocol might change, etc. There's no way a pharmaceutical company is leaving behind potential billions of dollars, and there's no way they won't look into it. So now you ask me specifically about the Wolverine stack. Okay, the Wolverine stack involves two separate peptides, BPC 157 and TB 500. These are together are named after Wolverine, the X-Men character, who can regenerate his body in seconds and therefore never ages, right? So Joe Rogan claims that it fixes elbow tendonitis, tennis elbow, and it's all over the gym communities, biohack forums, etc. Now, let me give you the numbers as to what the science is. As of March 2026, there are exactly 3 published human trials on BPC 157. All of them were conducted by the same research group in Florida. All 3 are tiny pilot studies with no placebo controls. The total number of humans across these 3 studies is fewer than 30 people. That is the entire human evidence base for one of the most widely used injectable compound in the wellness world right now. Fewer than 30 people. And there are
Wow.
no randomized control trials. There is no placebo group. I don't know what you want me to tell you more about that.
No, that's shocking. And speaking about that, it's obviously concerning. So beyond that, what are some actual safety concerns? Is it just that it's unproven, or could it actively harm you? What do you think about those safety concerns?
Such complicated questions you're asking me, Leila. These truly, because these compounds, right? They do have animal trials which look interesting, and I can give you that. In rodents, BPC 157 had showed enhanced tendon healing capacities, reduced the inflammation, improved muscle repairs. Those findings are real, and that's why some of the serious researchers were interested. But here's the thing people consistently miss. The success rate of translating animal studies into clinical benefit in human, it is statistically terrible. So we're talking somewhere around 5 to 10% across pharmacology broadly. So if you are betting on a person, you bet against the animal data, there's a bigger chance that you're going to fail than you're going to win. And also there's a red flag. There was a canceled trial, a formal phase 1 human safety trial, which was started in 2015 with 42 healthy volunteers, specifically designed to establish BPC 157 in safety for humans. The sponsor canceled it within a year and never published the results. In drug development, a canceled and unpublished phase 1 study is a major warning sign. It's strongly suggesting something went wrong. And the same way with TB 500, in all honesty, it's more worse and more deceptive, because most of the research people cite for TB 500, it's not even TB 500. It is on thymosin beta 4, a fully natural occurring protein. TB500 is a small synthetic fragment of that protein. A fragment does not automatically have the same biological effects or safety profile of the complete molecule. And as of 2026, there are zero, not few, zero published human clinical trials specifically on TB500. Zero. And the parent protein, thymosin beta 4, went through a phase 2 clinical trial that was completed in 2009. The results, once again, were never published over 15 years later. So that's not normal, and that's another red flag. So you're taking 2 red flags. So we have Joe Rogan telling his 11 million listeners per episode that this stack cured him of tendonitis. And we have wellness clinics charging thousands of dollars per session, and the scientific foundation is fewer than 30 humans ever studied on BP 157 and literally zero on TB 500. This is a big gap, and this is very scary that we have so many people on these medications and we don't know what they can do to you.
Yeah, that's kind of shocked. So I was not aware of that. So that's shocking to hear. And so what about Semix and Selank and the cognitive peptides that are being sold as smart drugs? And if are there
Oh,
any
yeah.
others that are being marketed or sold as smart drugs?
Okay, it's now the story is getting more nuanced, and I want to be careful here. I don't want to paint everything with the same brush, okay? Because these two are in a different category compared to BPC 157 and TB 500, even if they share some of the same regulatory and sourcing problems, okay? Samax and Selank were developed in Russia at the Institute of Molecular Genetics, and they go back to the Soviet era research. They are not new compounds. They are actually registered pharmaceutical medicines in Russia and the CIS countries, okay, where they are legally available by prescription for stroke rehabilitation, cognitive decline, and anxiety treatment. That is materially different starting point to BPC 157, which has never been approved anywhere for anything. There is clinical use in Russia, yes. Samax is a 7 amino acid peptide derived from the fragment of ACTH, a naturally occurring hormone. There is legitimate Russian clinical research showing that it increases BDNF, brain derived neurotropic factor, which is a protein often described as the fertilizer for brain cells. So, in stroke patient and improved neurological outcomes when combined with the standard stroke care was seen. There are also studies in healthy volunteers showing improved attention and short-term memory. Real studies, peer-reviewed and published. Okay. Moving on to Salank, it's an anxiolytic. It modulates the GABA system, gamma aminobutyric acid, and the serotonergic pathways, which gives you calming effect. Think like benzodiazepines without the sedative effects or the dependence profile. The rodent evidence for anxiety reduction is reasonably consistent, but the human data is thinner, but it exists. So, Samax and Salank are more credible than BPC 157. The research base is real, but it is entirely from Russia or often older. And unfortunately, they have not been replicated in large Western double blinded RCTs. They are not FDA approved in the US. The FDA has restricted both of these compounds. And in the US, they're sold as research chemicals with no quality control. So you don't know what is in the vial.
Interesting. And I have some questions about FDA and what they actually do in these scenarios. But before I get to that, how does the influencer machine actually work? And why do you think that doctors are getting dragged into it?
Oh, God. Okay. Great question. The chain is quite simple when you map it out. Okay. You have a wellness influencer, a podcaster like ourselves, but I'm both certified in internal medicine, general cardiology, and interventional cardiology. You have a gym celebrity, a biohacker. They try these peptides. Okay. And these people may be, spending more time than the regular human being on their wellness, on their health. Okay. I mean, like, for example, an influencer like Brian Johnson, who spends all of his time on his physical health. They try these peptides. They feel better. They attribute that improvement to the peptide. They announce it to the audience. The audience is health conscious and motivated, and they are also primed to believe health interventions works. Okay, so confirmation bias kicks in. People who try it also feel better and believe they do. They post about it. Demand signals to the gray market vendors. Vendors ramp up supply from Chinese manufacturer with no quality oversight. Clinics see the demand and start offering it with a veneer of medical legitimacy. A physician's name is attached to it. Yeah. At no point in this entire supply chain did anyone run a randomized controlled trial. And at no point did anyone give half the group a placebo to test whether the effect is real. And the placebo effect for pain, energy, and mood, and the things people commonly get, is very substantial. So, for example, I'm going to give you an example of an interventional cardiology study which had a sham arm. That is, the patients were made to think they were given anesthesia. They get a stick in their groin to believe that they had the procedure, but the intervention was not done for them. They are
Oh,
made to asleep for 30 minutes to an hour, and they are brought back, and no one knows about what the patient and the family, everyone's, they've all signed it. The patients who did not get any interventions also felt better. Not all of them, but 20 to 30% of them felt better, which made us all think, oh my God, the placebo arm works. So when you really cannot tell the difference between a real intervention and or not, how can you tell whether these peptides are actually having an effect or not without a control group? So with the influencers and the podcasters and the N equals 1 experimenters, that's what we are having. There is no control group. So how am I to know this is placebo effect or effect of the medications?
that's interesting. And let's talk a little bit about where we started to talk about earlier with the FDA. So, what did the FDA actually do? And what does the 2026 regulatory situation actually look like?
Oh God. Okay. Another controversial,
Let's,
interesting topic. Let's talk about
let's,
it.
let's go from there today.
In late 2023, the FDA moved 19 widely used peptides, including BPC 157, TB 500, CJC 1295, ipamorelin, Samax, and Salanc, to a restricted Category 2 list. This list effectively banned licensed compounding pharmacies from preparing them. The FDA stated reasons such as insufficient data, immunogenicity risk, contamination concerns, unknown clinical efficacy. The intended effect was consumer protection. The actual effect was opposite. People who had been getting these compounds through licensed compounding pharmacies with at least some quality oversight, such as sterility testing, physician involvement, are now forced to the gray market vendors and offshore suppliers. Peptides imported from China doubled in 2025 to $328 million. The
Wow.
2023 restrictions inadvertently supercharged the supply chain they were designed to contain.
Wow. And this is controversial. Like, we're going to make it a little more controversial now, speaking about the FDA. So, the whole FDA giving approval is confusing overall, right? Because kids are
Yes.
not getting vaccinated, but peptides are getting approved. So, can you kind of go over that nuance here?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Okay, I'm going to get into that, but I also want to bring it to your attention. RFK Jr. reversed it. He announced on the Joe Rogan Experience a formal regulatory process, not before scientific advisory committee or not after notifying FDA staff that 14 of the 19 peptides would return back to category 1, meaning licensed compounding pharmacies could prepare them again without a prescription. So, what does moving them from category 2 back to category 1 mean or does not mean? Okay, so moving them from category 2 to category 1 does not mean FDA actually approved it. It does not mean safety has been established. It does not mean clinical trials have been done. It just means compounding is legally permitted again with the prescription and nothing more. The underlying evidence has not changed. So there is a legitimate argument that bringing the supply back to regulated compounding pharmacies improves the quality over the gray market. That argument has real merit, I'll give you that. But the announcement was made via a podcast, okay, before the FDA had published a formal notice, in a way that sent message to the consumers and clinics that these compounds had somehow been validated when they have not. So now you ask me about the whole FDA controversies and vaccines and stuff like that. That's even more, I want to be precise than being partisan here, because there's a genuine nuance, then there's a genuine contradiction. And I think the listeners deserve both. The nuance first.
Yeah.
RFK Jr.'s position is rooted in what legal scholars call medical libertarianism. That is, the idea that individuals have the right to access what they choose to put in their own bodies. For terminally ill patients who have exhausted conventional options, that argument has real moral weight. The risk calculus for someone with stage 4 cancer and no remaining options is genuinely different. And then there's the legitimate case that the 2023 blanket FDA ban on 19 peptides push people towards dangerous gray market rather than protecting them from it. Okay. So yes, there is something valid in the framing that access matters and that gray market is harmful. But let's look at what happened. RFK Jr., as a Secretary of Health and Human Services, publicly, loudly, and repeatedly cast doubt on the safety of the MMR vaccine, a product studied in hundreds of millions of people over decades with a safety and efficacy profile we understand with extraordinary depth. His standard for vaccine is that the evidence is never quite enough, the studies are never quite rigorous enough, and more scrutiny is required. And then on February 27, 2026, he appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience and talked about the peptides, etc. Phase 1 trials cancelled, unpublished, TB0, 500, zero human trials. I want to kind of talk about the contrast here. Vaccines, hundreds of millions studied, decades of surveillance, multiple independent replications. RFK Jr.'s verdict, not enough evidence. Okay, the evidence is just not enough. More scrutiny is needed. Then BPC 157, fewer than 30 humans. Phase 1 is cancelled, zero randomized controlled trials. RFK Jr.'s verdict, legalize, and announced via a podcast before FDA published a world. So it is two sides of the same coin. He seems to believe evidence is not needed for one particular compound, but more evidence is needed in a different particular compound. So BioCentury, one of the most respected publications in life science, described it directly. If injectables can reach consumers without human trial data by executive fiat, the foundation of the drug approval system is eroded. This is not a partisan commentary. That is an assessment of what happens to a regulatory infrastructure when its stated standard of evidence becomes selectively applied. I'm not telling anyone to trust pharma companies uncritically. I'm not telling anyone that the FDA has been a flawless institution. Neither of those things is true. But I am telling you that in 2026, FDA status, whether something is approved, banned, or reclassified, has to be evaluated by you personally with a critical eye. The label is now a starting point of your question and not answers to it.
And even speaking about that, with all these claims, peptide claims, what is the actual decision framework? What would you say? How should a listener really evaluate peptide claims?
Okay, so I think every listener to forget peptides, any supplements, any medications, they should ask themselves enough number of questions. The first question, what problem are you trying to solve within yourself personally? Number two, is the body of science supporting this particular medication or supplement, and what's the claim? Okay, is it phase 1? Is it animal trials? Is it phase 1 trials? Is it phase 2 trials? Are there phase 3 trials? Is there a randomized controlled trial? And how much time has gone since this medication or supplement has been used in the human history? Do you have all sides of the information, not just what you want to hear, but all sides of it, the good and the bad and the ugly about every particular thing? And three, if the benefit of it is overwhelming compared to the side effect profile or the risk of it, then you can lean towards the benefit. But if you don't know what the benefit is going to be at all, go back to the initial question. What problem are you trying to solve? Are there other ways you can avoid this till more information comes, the science becomes clear before you take it? So for me, I've had 3 kids and all my kids are vaccinated with at the MMR vaccine. I have been in India looking at children who did not have access to vaccination and have neurological disabilities because of measles. Okay. I've had young men with infertility problems. I have seen
Wow.
all of that. And therefore, and MMR is a vaccine which has been studied over and over and over again. So I'm going to lean towards getting the vaccine. When it comes to
Of
peptides,
course.
I'm keeping a curious eye open to see where the evidence lies. Do I have enough evidence for insulin, oxytocin? As I said, I was induced with oxytocin. Enough evidence on GLP-1 agonists? Absolutely, yes. But will I
Mhm.
inject any of these athletic peptides, the Wolverine stack, etc.? Not right now. I'm not saying never because I'm waiting for the evidence to come. Not right now. I need more human evidence. I am not a rat and I'm not going to be taking medications, injecting something into my body which is only being tested on rats. That's my take.
Exactly. No, I mean, I'm right there with you. I completely agree. It's so new. Like you're saying, all these other like vaccines, and it's been proven. It's been around for so long. All of these ones you mentioned are it's new. It's kind of scary to just base it off of the little bit of research and knowledge that we have right now. But what would you say is the bottom line, and what should listeners actually do with all of this information?
Yeah, we are truly living in a moment where the establishment crowd has taken control of the establishment. And I think most people assumed that when that happened, they would raise the bar, demand more rigorous trials, fix the conflicts of interest, make the system serve patients better. Instead, personally, it's my opinion that they lowered the bar. They made it easier to sell you things with less evidence. They opened the door to the gray market while ignoring the supply chain. They re-legalized compounds with no human trials, and they announced it not in an official capacity, but on a podcast. The skeptics of the big pharma became enablers of the gray market. People who said, do your own research on vaccines are the same people who just made it easier to inject yourself with something that has never been or literally not enough research on humans. So biology truly does not care whether, RFK Jr. supports it, Joe Rogan supports it, or any other influencer podcaster supports it. The tumors do not care about ideology. Only the evidence tells you the truth. So do your own research, read the actual study, demand human trial data, and check if the phase 1 trial was published or quietly cancelled. Because in 2026, that work is for you to do, and nobody, unfortunately, is going to do it for you. So evidence on most of these peptides, wait, please wait. And before, becomes too late. And establishment, unfortunately, takes time. Like, for example, smoking. The doctors were claiming about the ill effects of smoking before the smoking warnings came. And that is with so much evidence in place. Now we are injecting compounds which has no human trial or very minimal human trial. I am just having such a tough time with it. So I will just once again reiterate, do your own research. There are enough AI tools. This is where AI should be used. Take whatever compound, whatever supplement you want, throw it in whichever AI engine you want it to work for you, and ask it to do deep research, tell you the brutal truth, and use it as your use it. If not everyone can go to pubmed.gov and look at a scientific paper and understand the results of it. So use all your accessory tools. You have to do your homework with this. And that's
Mhm.
what my statement is going to be here.
Absolutely. And there are all these tools now that we didn't have before. So why we should be utilizing them to do the right research and really find out what it is that you want to find out, especially when it's putting things into your body. So I think that, if there's and chime in here at completely, but I think if there's one takeaway from today, it's this. Peptides are not just one thing, and some are legitimate, well-studied medical therapies, and others are early stage, unproven, or being used far outside of the evidence. So the risk isn't just whether something works, it's whether you're making a decision based on biology or perhaps even on marketing. So In a space driven by optimization culture, influencer incentives, and fragmented regulation, I think clarity becomes really your biggest advantage. So I think that this episode really helped clarify that for all of the listeners, myself included. I feel like I learned so much from this episode, but I think it helped clarify something that's been confusing to so many people. So thank you so much, Dr. Maran, for this episode. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to add on before we wrap up.
Yes, I've created a little scorecard about the peptides, and I'll share it with you so that you can put it on the show notes. And also links to every study which we discussed today is also be in the show notes. And anyone wants to do deeper research, which is what I'm asking everyone to do, the studies which we discussed today is going to be there as well. With that, see you all next time.
Thank you so much to all the listeners. If this episode helped clarify something for you, subscribe, follow, share it with someone trying to really make sense of the noise around modern health trends, and do your research, key takeaway from today. And we will link everything we spoke about in the show notes. And thank you again. This was a great episode, and we'll see you next time on Infinite Health.